Let's study Parshat Yitro with Rashi's commentary so that we can learn Torah with our commentator of the year, Rabbeinu Shlomo Yitzchaki Rashi, the classic commentary on the Torah that starts so many conversations about the verses of the Torah, what we know about those featured in the narratives of Torah, and what we know from the Midrash, because Rashi oftentimes brings Midrashim that expand upon what Torah says in its simple sense, or what the verses present. And through his teaching, Rashi got people in touch with rabbinic literature, in addition to his own sense of what's really happening in Torah when he was making his commentary in 11th century France. Here in chapter 18, Yitro, Moses' father-in-law, known as a Midianite priest, a non-Jewish soul, who comes out with Moses' wife and his children, is rejoicing over the goodness that God did for Israel, and according to tradition, becomes part of the Jewish people, rejecting all idolatry and accepting God as his own. Vayomer Yitro, Baruch Adonai, Asher hitzil etchem miyad Mitzrayim. In verse 10 of chapter 18, Yitro is the one in Torah to say Baruch Adonai. So anybody who's ever heard the Jewish phrase Baruch HaShem, it was Yitro, first who was not Jewish, and then who became a follower of Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai our God, part of the family of the Jewish people. He was the one in Torah to say Baruch HaShem, Baruch Adonai. What made him feel like God was the provider of such blessing in the world? That God had saved the Jewish people from the tyranny and domination of Egypt. Atayadati, in verse 11 of chapter 18. Now I know, ki gadol Adonai mikol ha-Elohim. Yitro was familiar with all the other mythologies, all the other idolatries, all the other options when it came to worship and allegiance. And finally, Yitro came to realize that it was truly God who would, in the end, not only demand the justice that the Jewish people deserved, but measure poetic justice into the world vis-a-vis the entire course of history. And how do we get that sense? Because at the end of verse 11, it says, Ki vadavar asher zadu aleihem. Because with that which they schemed against the Jewish people, the Egyptians were mightily brought down. What's that referring to? That's referring to the fact that the Egyptians sought to destroy the Jewish people with water. B'mayim dimu la'abdam. The Egyptians imagined that they would destroy the Israelites with water. Remember that Pharaoh had commanded that all the newborn children be thrust into the Nile. Vehem ne'evdu b'mayim. But it was at the Sea of Reeds that the walls of water came crashing over the tyrants. That level of poetic justice gives hope in every generation, even in our time, that ultimately godly law, traditional values, will in the end lift not only God's name, but lift the righteous souls who deserve to be redeemed from oppressive thinking in the world. Oppressive thinking that some hold even as high moral standard. And so careful that it's not idolatry, careful that it's not tyranny of thought, of perspective, careful that it's not usurping the Torah's framework of morality, Because in the end, measures of poetic justice have been measured out by God for the world and the world's peoples. And if you stick true to Torah values and you're part of Am Yisrael, as Yitro knew and expresses with that phrase, Baruch HaShem, Baruch Adonai, then justice shall be done. That's the power of Parshat Yitro. Not only do the Jewish people recognize that, but the once Midianite, known in another place in Torah as a Kenite, the righteous Gentile, joins our family. And his entire family converts with Moses, making them a part of it. And as the family expands, the sense that God not only demands justice, but measured out poetic justice in the world, that is the sense we get from chapter 18, the chapter of life, Yudchet, in the book of Exodus. Shabbat Shalom.